Thank you, everyone, for joining us. It's so good to see your faces and the little phone icons. And even if I don't see you, I feel you. So, thanks for so much for taking the time out of your day to join us. Excited to have everyone on the call, and yeah. So I just wanted to open by talking a little bit, just a tiny bit about what's going on at West Photo, but sort of expand that out just a tiny bit. So, we opened to the public to come into our store yesterday.
Mm,
Business was extremely robust
mm,
for in-store traffic. Um, we have a safety officer that's meeting everyone at the door. All customers and employees are required to wear a mask and follow social distancing. We have basically a one customer to one employee ratio for what we're running in the store. We have, of course, hand sanitizer and gloves available for our customers. And when we meet them at the door, we're letting them know what our expectations are in terms of what they need. And then we're directing them specifically to a specific associate. Um, am I comfortable with that? No. I'm not, I just, overall, I'm just really uncomfortable. And I imagine I'm
mm,
not alone in that.
mm,
It's not the safest way. It's certainly not the safest way. The safest way would be for me to shut the doors and send everyone home. And I've made the decision for our business and for our employees that we just simply can't afford to do that. But what I really what has really been successful for us, the two things that I think that have carried us through this time, and I do feel like, to be honest, I don't feel like my business is any weaker than when we started this. And the two things that have really kept us alive and kept us going, number one is the staff. We really have an amazing staff, and we work really hard. A lot of some of the things that we do for our staff on any number of levels. We work really hard to try our best to take care of them the best way that we can and the best way that we know how. And we're continually refining that. And during this time, the staff really came through for us in a big way, and it just warms the conkles of my heart to see how far people were willing to go to make sure that that we're in good shape, and that we're able to continue to provide a living for everyone that works with us. Um, the other thing that I felt like really helped us through this difficult time is the diversity of our business. So the fact that we play in so many different spaces was really, really instrumental in helping us to survive. So the fact that we're an active player in third-party marketplace, that we're extremely active on the web, that we are extremely active with social media, with our classes, with our rentals, with our wholesale, with our commercial division. All of those things, it's always been the case for us that, when one thing isn't working or one thing isn't going right, we're able to pretty quickly focus our energy elsewhere. And sometimes that means building something new. In this case, I can tell you one piece, and I would call it diversity, that we added to our equation is that we started up local deliveries. So now if you order by a certain time, you're going to get that delivery delivered to your door in a contactless manner that same day. And that's something that we plan on continuing, not just through this time period, but I don't see an end to it. And in the end, when we ran the numbers, it looks like it's going to actually be cheaper to do that than it would be necessarily to ship the product to some of those local customers. So we've really been able, to lean on the diversity of our business in order to survive during this time. Um, But what the one thing that I wanted to point out is that I think that it's good that we're getting a variety of perspectives, not just from retailers, but also from the vendors and from everyone else. And what I would just encourage everyone to do is to really focus on the needs, on what you need personally, what your employees need, and what your business needs. And there's a lot of opinions. There's a lot of information that's out there. There's a lot. What Midwest Photo, for example, is doing simply might not be right for your business. It might not be time for you to open up yet. It might be time for you to open in a different way than what Midwest Photo or that Mike's Photo or that anyone else has opened up. You know, on the vendor side, it might be time to start sending your people out and traveling. It might not. You know, that's going to be different for every single business. And it really is up to you guys to weigh that. And the truth is that there are no perfect answers. It's going to be different for everyone. And it seems like right now, it feels like to me, the way that I'm feeling is every decision that I make is right and wrong. And that's really how it feels. And one of the things that I've been trying to focus on a little bit more than anything else is just giving myself a break and just saying, you know, that might be what they're doing. We're not necessarily ready for that. You know, it might not, you know, in a perfect world, my business would be completely shut down and everyone would be paid. But that isn't necessarily possible. And, you know, for me, I'm just focused on, and I would encourage you guys all to just give yourself a break and just know that there are no perfect answers and that every business is going to have its own unique needs. And, you know, and hopefully people will be understanding. And I can tell you that Midwest Photo will be understanding. And our vendors will be understanding. And, you know, we just all need to work together, but really just give yourself a break. You know, you're doing what you can, and there are no perfect answers. So with that, that's all I really wanted to say. And at this point, I think I'll turn it over to Jerry. You there, Jerry?
Sounds good, boys. Yes, I'm here. Thank you very much for those words, and I think everyone is really sort of understanding what you're going through and what a lot of people are going through right now. But what we wanted to do as the Imaging Alliance was sort of, you know, take a little bit of a broad view on what's been happening in the market, and we wanted to a second here, you know, talk about what's going on in terms of market research, talk about the retail channels, you know, hear from a manufacturer, hear maybe what you could do virtually, all to give everyone sort of a benchmark of where we are. To talk about, maybe come up with some ideas on what you can be doing. So we appreciate everyone being here. I just want to start out with asking everyone, if you're not speaking, to put yourself on mute. So we can do that. I actually spoke to a bunch of retailers. I sent an email out to about 50 retailers, 55 retailers yesterday, and asked them to give me an update. So if you go on to, and this is a shameless plug sort of, but if you go on to digitalreporter.com, there's a really interesting article, and I'm just putting it up for a second. I'm not going to read through it, but where we talk, you know, looking at what Mark Coleman did on his storefront was really amazing and actually very inspiring. But we talked to about 8 or 9 different retailers on what they're doing and what their ideas are. Some are short, some are long, but I thought that it would be helpful if for all of you. So that's online right now. So now I got to get rid of this, of course. Let me put that here. Okay, so with that in mind, one second here. I'm back. Okay. So our thought was to sort of take a broad view. So we're going to hear from Ian Hamilton, who's president of technology sector of NPD, who's going to talk about current research trends right now and the very, very current, and we appreciate that, Ian. Speak with Kathy Nelson, who actually put on her training program or her convention virtually at the last minute, and she'll talk about how that was actually very successful. We'd like to talk to Hans Hartman, who did a great survey among not only retailers but everyone about what's happening with COVID-19, and that was prior to the latest incident. We're going to hear from our friend Gerard, who's going to give us our perspectives on his store openings, and then John Brule from Sony is going to talk to us a little bit from a manufacturer's perspective. So we're pretty excited about what we have to speak with here. Our format is this. We're going to give each of the presentations. There'll be some time for questions and discussions. If you could send us your questions through chat, it'll be easier rather than having everyone try to speak up at the same time. So what we're going to do is we're going to start with Ian, and we're going to turn the control over to him. He'll give a presentation. Each one will be about 8 minutes. We're going to try to keep this meeting to about an hour. And again, we appreciate everyone being here. So that being said.
Thank you very much. Hey, appreciate your time today. I'm going to get through a couple quick trends that we're seeing. And I just want to say that I'm very interested in today's presentation and hearing from you guys. I know a lot of you are retailers right now, and it's an unprecedented time. So I can't imagine how you're dealing with this, but it sounds like you're all, tackling it head on like the business leaders you are. So it's very inspirational. So thank you for having me. Go to the next slide. And, real briefly, just a reminder, we've got about 220,000 doors providing us with point of sale data on a weekly basis. We publish that weekly data about 6 days after the end of the week. So we get to see some pretty real-time things that have been occurring. What I'll be talking today about is obviously really more of the effects of COVID and how that's been occurring in another week or so. We'll obviously be addressing a whole new situation that's occurring in our country. We also have millions of receipts. You'll see a little bit of that. So we'll talk about online versus offline sales, and that's where that's going to come in. So we track receipts. That helps us look at buying behaviors and market basket, and we have all the demographics for people who can attach to their sales. We also have mobile device activations. You won't see any of that today. And we do a lot of consumer surveys. We've done that for over 50 years. I've left some of that out as well. I know some other folks are going to talk about survey data as well. And we use all that kind of stuff to forecast, do pricing analytics and things like that. So let's look at the first slide, which if you haven't been seeing any of our WebExes or webcasts at NPD might be a little bit surprising. For me, it's somewhat mind-blowing. For our analysts, it's been an amazing, interesting couple of months to follow the market, albeit scary. This is April, so you see April week 1, 2, 3, and then May 1, 2, 3. What it doesn't show is March, and March in and of itself is a 45-minute to an hour presentation on what occurred immediately after what was essentially a lockdown and people going back into their homes and working from home. In March, we saw lots of work from home stuff just skyrocket. You couldn't even get your hands on a video display monitor, some of that kind of. It was tough to get your hands on anything. People were buying PCs, that usually they would wait to get discounted. They were buying them at full price. Webcams off the shelves. You couldn't sell a webcam in February, and then you couldn't find one in March. So it was an amazing, interesting way to look at different categories that were growing. Get here to April, and you can see if you look at April week 2 through, which is really stimulus. And so in March, and I'll talk about it in a little bit, imaging and all the fun categories, really cratered in many ways, and it became really more about working from home. TVs stayed high in unit sales in March, but TVs were really more of a unit play as it was smaller products, cheaper products, and we think a lot, an extra TV as everybody was crunching into their homes, and that could double as a monitor as well. But that was about the only fun category. Everything else was really work from home. In April, stimulus checks hit. Things got a little bit more fun for people. They used a lot of their money, it's clear, and money that they're saving here on vacations and going out, eating out, all that kind of thing. They're clearly spending it on general merchandise categories in April and now in May, which is amazing. But if you look at these 6 weeks of growth, so not counting April week 1, that's a little over $2.2 billion of growth over last year for those 6 weeks. It's an amazing trend and one that we're following very closely. So And it varies by category. As I mentioned, we're starting to see things like headphones and audio categories and imaging, I'll show in a minute, growing. Bigger TVs now growing, whereas in March it was smaller ones. So it's been a fascinating thing to watch maybe the biggest shift in consumer behavior ever, certainly in my lifetime. Next slide, Jeremy. Here we're using that receipt data that I talked about at the beginning, just to look overall in all of our tech categories that we cover, looking at share, dollar share, which is an important thing to keep in mind. Dollar share by category. Online is blue, and in-store is green. Buy online, pick up in store, or curbside is online, is blue. And you can see that about a year ago on May 19, it was 54%, 46. Tech has always been a leader in general merchandise categories in terms of being more online, or aggressively online relative to other categories in the industry. What holds this dollar share back historically has been TVs. A lot of people don't like to buy TVs. It's an intimate purchase. You don't like to buy it online. You want to see that TV in person and buy it in person. So, but what we're seeing here is, if you look at July 19, that was Prime Day at 67%. We just eclipsed that in April at 68% of all dollar sales. So just adding all the dollars together, and whether they were online or offline, dollar sales, 68% were online. So that's a pretty significant shift. And I think the retailers who are able to handle that change, and obviously really one of the things that there are people who were planning, online businesses in the past and have ramped up and are ready to fulfill and deliver online, have fared fairly well. If we go to the next slide, we look at kind of the same data, checkout data, but we look at the weekly basket size, and you start on the far left and you look, it's kind of like what we call a liar's chart right there. Keep in mind that the bottom thing is $30 and the top is 46, just so you can see some of the change. But there's not a ton of change in terms of dollars in between, but it's a very interesting thing for me. The most interesting part about it is the increase in basket size in retail, in store, going from below around 33, and peaking up near 44 and being in the 40s now. It's pretty interesting as we see people, minimizing the amount of shopping efforts that they're doing. I'm sure many of us can relate to pre-COVID times of going in and going to the store many times a week. And there was, sometimes it might have been a little escape for us to get out and go shopping. And now it's more like a mission, right? That we're getting in there, not so price conscious in some categories. And these are for everything that NPD covers. I want to make sure I clear this final slide here is everything that we cover. So all the general merchandise categories, including beauty and other things. So to see, in store, the basket size increase, I think is representative of the trends we're seeing in terms of buying behavior. Jerry, we can go into the imaging section. You can go right into the next slide, please. So here we kind of cover this in the next slide. So in the interest of time, why don't I go to the next slide, because we're going to talk basically about this exact same thing. Well, in the next few slides. So first of all, let's look at mirrorless cameras. So keep in mind, we're talking about February week 1. We're looking at our weekly data here. And this is what a lot of us and a lot of you guys are struggling with here. As the pandemic hit, some of the more fun categories dropped off a bit. Here, the green line is 2020, and we're looking at dollar sales in millions on a weekly basis. And in 2020, mirrorless cameras, this is focusing only on mirrorless cameras, dropped off considerably here in 2020 as we went into the pandemic. But as we hit, April, we started to see an increase, and we were here in May week 3, getting real close to pandemic levels. So if we go to the next slide, now we'll look also at ASP. So this first we'll look at mirrorless cameras, and then we'll look at all lenses will be the next and final slide. So here is it's kind of a similar way to look at what we looked at last time, but it was the last slide, but it's unit sales. And so in the light blue is 2019 units, again, starting at February week 1 and working through May of week 3. And so light blue is 2019, dark blue is 2020. You can see a couple interesting things there. ASPs were holding steady in the category as we were working our way through February. Overall units were increasing, so positive mirrorless camera story in March until you kind of hit the last week of, February, until you hit the last week of February and started working into March, and that's where things got really tough. I think a mirrorless camera as an expensive product is also a bit of an emotional purchase, something you want to play with and touch and look at. It's a fun thing to purchase, right? And so, and any real camera is. And so I think that's, part of the challenge that we've had. You can see through March into April, things dropped off. You start to get to that week 2 in April, stimulus checks and that kind of thing, people settling into a new normal. Perhaps those that are still employed, recognizing that they're not spending on meals out, movies, concerts, etc. ASPs have been a problem though, right? So it's, that growth is at the expense of some ASPs. Their sales prices coming down a little bit below 2019, obviously, and cascading down a little bit as we go through COVID. So that's been a challenge. Finally, we'll look here at lenses. So this is all lenses, not just mirrorless, and it's a similar view, right? So we start at February week 1 and start working our way through the pandemic, and then again you have dark blue is 2020, light blue 2019, orange is ASP or sales prices for 2019, and green is for 2020. Very similar story. It works along lines. I think lenses year over year in February weren't eclipsing 2019, whereas mirrorless cameras were. There's a little bit of a different story there, but the drop in sales really kind of mirrors what we just saw in mirrorless, and ASPs coming down as well. So, we're releasing our forecast today, so we're actually, as soon as I get off this call, I'll be looking at our forecast. I think never have we had more of a challenge to really look at, the forecasting the future, even if there wasn't the civil unrest. It's very challenging to grasp what's going to happen in consumers' behavior. And I know we're going to get into some primary research in a little bit. I think it's Hans who's going to speak to that, which is pretty interesting in this time, right? Getting to know the consumers and what they plan to do is incredible. So we'll be tracking that, and we're working to help our customers and the industry navigate these challenging times. So are there any questions?
One on chat, they're asking if there was anything on DSLRs specifically, or any learning on that.
Yeah, JC, I think maybe we could come offline. We absolutely had. We can break it up in a number of different ways. I think the trend for the overall DSLRs looks very similar. This is focal lenses. It's a different thing, but it definitely, we saw a similar dip. But we break it out into many different attributes and subcategories for the imaging industry.
Right, and looks like Stu is asking, can you provide a year-to-date decrease as a percentage for mirrorless and lens?
Sure. Why don't I'll just reply all when we send out the deck, and I'll reply all with that number, and I'll look at DSLRs as well. And so when we send out the deck, we'll send out a PDF, and I'll put in the email that the answer to the year-to-date decrease as a percentage. So I'll absolutely do that.
Awesome. And on the chat, Phil Livingston saying that DSLRs have been strong for precision camera, and I've heard a lot of strength in DSLRs across the board. So I think that's great. Well, Ian, thank you very much. We appreciate your input, and we appreciate the knowledge. So thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, next we're going to turn to Kathy.
All right.
Kathy, can you control your presentation, or you want?
I think I can. Let's see.
Oops,
that's it. You shouldn't be seeing that. You should be not seeing that either. Don't look at my emails, right? All right. Now you're seeing my play from current side, right?
Yep.
You got my slide? Okay. So I'm just going to do a quick overview on what happened with us. For those of you who plan events or conferences, we spend 12 months planning our annual conference. We were to be in Atlanta in April 15th. We had all our speakers lined up, and then I was on February 27th. I was at Roots Tech. You can see me signing. It's so funny. I think about this, like how crazy it was. Like I'm signing my books over here, and you can see, the masses of people. There were 30,000 people there, and nobody was even breathing a word about the coronavirus yet at that point, at least to my knowledge, until I got a text from one of my members saying, what are your plans about the conference? It seems like Facebook has canceled their, a conference or something. And I was annoyed, like, wow, you got, geez, I don't know. And within a few weeks, I was on my way to Atlanta trying to negotiate out of my contract, where they weren't allowing us out of our, originally they did not allow us out of my contract. And it was going to be an $80,000 fine, and it was just a nightmare. And so I flew down there, and finally they agreed to do the contract next year, same dates and everything, and kept my deposit. And so I flew home and thought, I'm going to do everything I can. I couldn't afford to refund all my members' registration money that they had paid. I usually collect that in June. So I had that money since June of 2019. And so I thought, I'm just going to come home and put on the best darn virtual conference anybody's ever seen. So, so basically this is, I'm going to just do my 5 lessons I learned in 5 weeks of doing that. So I was very encouraging to my members and telling them, this is going to be great and everything. But honestly, I was like, what the heck? I mean, how am I going to make sure I do this? So I learned, number one, there was no roadmap and what to do, but I had 24 speakers that had agreed to speak. You'll see Jim Malcolm was one of them. He was coming back to do a talk. And so I reached out to all the speakers I had, and I said, are you willing to shift and go virtual? And I will do everything I can to ensure the technology works. I'll staff up and make sure that we, eliminate all roadblocks to people feeling it was a successful experience. They all said yes, which really helped. And then I learned, started researching what kind of platform am I going to do? Like I didn't want to just do Zoom, like what we're doing here. I thought we had 7 days. I just spread it out over 7 days, and there's no way I thought people could do 7 days of Zoom meetings. And so I discovered this something called Hey Summit, Remo, and Big Marker. So I don't know if any of you have heard of any of these programs yet, but one of them in particular, this Hey Summit, was a really amazing platform that I was able then, and I'm going to actually take us to the website here. What's great now is you can see that the conference itself, it's called an evergreen conference. So it's still sitting here. People could still actually purchase tickets to this conference because everything was recorded and sits here forever live in this program. So what Hey Summit is a really interesting company. They're out of Scotland. They, and Sony, you'll see Sony, you were a sponsor. What they did is realized they're like kind of the front end, and it ties all the pieces in the back end. So your whole virtual conference exists on this platform, but it's all tied in on the back end with different programs. So, see if I'm doing a bit. Whoops, I stopped my screen share. Sorry about that. Let me delete that. I wanted to go back to my PowerPoint here. See, sorry if I can get myself back to the PowerPoint. So there's another program that we discovered called Remo. And if you have not checked out Remo yet, if any of you are doing any kind of online classes, training, or anything, this changed the entire experience for our members. You actually come into this and you sit at these little tables. People are at tables, and when you're at a table, you can see there's looks like Zoom, but you're only talking to people at your table, and you can see who's at the other tables. And by double clicking, you could actually move to another table. This was an amazing experience, and we are actually doing this every week now. And it has different floors. You actually, this is a screenshot, but you can go up to different floors. There's an amazing chat experience. And our sponsors, you can see we had like Knicks Play, or they have their own lounge, and people can go and talk to them privately in the lounge. And so these kind of online platforms really made a difference in the experience our members had. And just a quick look at the number, we had 135 people registered to come to our conference. Within 2 weeks, we had 102 people register for this summit. So that was an additional revenue of $35,000 that I did not expect to see. And our sponsors loved it because we were able to, using that Remo, we could give our sponsor like the main stage. So it looks like a major, so in other words, like let's say it was Ryan from Knicks Play. He's out in Hong Kong. We're interviewing him. He's showing up. Everybody, all 400 people are there watching him speak. And then they could go to their tables and then have conversations about whatever he had talked about And it was just an amazing experience for our sponsors as well. They had much more community engagement than they ever would have had if, I think, by just coming and showing up at a conference. And then just for us personally, where we're going as the photo managers, you know, e-learning is the future. If you look at these numbers, it's expected to grow by $325 billion by 2025. I'm seeing that right now. I've been doing, just this month alone, I've done a series of webinars on just getting your printed photos organized. I've done a local library. There's a guy named Dototech. He had 1,800 people sign up for the webinar I did for him. PhotoMind just did one with me yesterday. They had over 500 people. I just did a CBS morning show called Wake Up with Marcy. So we're just seeing significant engagement with people that are, and I don't know if it's going to change when people aren't quite home as much as they are, but I think everybody is kind of shifting to an online world. And then our online classes that we already have, we had no new classes. So in 2019, we had 127 people, you know, pay to participate in one of our classes. In April and May this year, we had 206. We just increased to 264 people. And again, that's without any new content. We've got a lot of new courses that we're getting ready to roll out. But I think that just kind of gives you an idea of where the online world is going in kind of a significant way that we're playing, you know, working within that. And then my last lesson, this is part of the presentation I did for our members, but I talked about, you know, lesson 1 was there's no roadmap. Lesson 2, be kind even when others are not. I mean, I did get a lot of, not a lot, but I had to really deal with disappointment, people wanting refunds, and really working hard and managing. I think it's kind of leveled off now, but in the beginning stages, I think as people started realizing what was really happening, I felt like I could be a lightning rod for some of people's frustrations. And I just worked really hard on, you know, meeting each person with grace and kindness, no matter how they were, whatever was happening. Lesson 3 was asking for help. So when I decided to bring everything online, I made a budget and I staffed up with my virtual assistants. And the idea was that we had somebody on call during every conference, so every class. So we were doing concurrent classes, and I had a tech person. Well, became my tech people. So if somebody couldn't get on, they could email immediately at support. At the photo managers, we got them on. You know, I just really made sure that we made everything as smooth as possible. And that was, I had to ask for a lot of help to do that. We're in this together. I think this presentation, Jerry, that you've put together, I think all of us in the world are in a community together of trying to figure out ways that we can help both our businesses all thrive in these new times. And then last of all, the importance of keeping a sense of humor. I've noticed this, I don't know if you've noticed this, but the first couple of weeks, I mean, it was hysterical. The things I was getting, it certainly has changed since then. But like this woman, you know, knitting a noose about her husband, you know, and she's quarantined, making a noose. I don't know why I found these things really funny when it first came out. And so the importance of keeping a sense of humor, I think, was critical as well for us during this time. So that's basically my quick, very fast overview. But oh yes, and we are getting ready. Yes, we are going to continue to sell these recordings. We just moved them. So that summit, the Hay Summit, stays as an evergreen summit. Anybody can find that at any time. But we just took all the recordings, put it on our training platform, and now I've packaged them down to 3. You can purchase 3 of the classes, you know, different packages. We're getting ready to roll that out starting tomorrow. And I expect significant sales from that as well. So, and then as I'm looking at next year's conference, I'm getting ready to do my call for speakers, and I'm going to have it listed that they'll either be in person, but I think we'll do a combo of virtual. We had people from all over the world, you know, so we had Australia and Denmark and, you know, South Africa, and members. And our membership, we've added over 50 new professionals in the past 2 months who are looking to do this as a business. And our members are as busy as they've ever been. They are all managing large photo collections for people who suddenly looked at all their photos and realized, I need help. So for us, it's been a really interesting, surprisingly good business past few months, which is just shocking to me in a way that it turned out that way. So.
That was great, Kathy. That was really a kick save, as they say, right?
What's that?
You were going down, and then you pulled it out, and it turned out being more successful than you.
I mean, when those numbers of ticket sales started rolling in, I was like, we went from really depressed about how the heck I was going to not give people refund. I mean, just really. And then, I was like, every day it was like another 5,000 or 6,000. They were like, what? Like, you know, so, and we didn't even have any marketing strategy in place. And we just, you know, so.
One of the things that I think is really kind of interesting is that all of a sudden people had to get comfortable with virtual. Right? Think about all the teachers and all the kids, and you know, it's now the way of the world. And so even people that would never even think of doing anything virtually, it's become almost a part of everyone's life. So I think, you know, we as an industry can really assume now that people are a little bit more comfortable with virtual than they would have been, you know, 3-4 months ago.
And somebody asked okay, so Hey Summit, I'm going to try, I don't have the technical language that maybe somebody else might be able to explain it better. What Hey Summit is the platform that links you back. So on the front end, everything, you know, you see that Hey Summit. On the back end, they are the ones who introduced me to, they have it where you can, their iPad must be linked into it, right? So Remo is separate from Hey Summit. You can just have a Remo, you can just own a, you know, subscription to Remo, right? It's a subscription-based program. So it's like $150 a month to $400 a month. And Remo sets up like conference rooms. I know Chamber of Commerce are using it a lot as a networking opportunity. And Hey Summit, though, was what allowed us to sell it, do the e-commerce part, you know, collect all the money and all those pieces. So I hope that makes sense. So the Hey Summit was really the e-commerce and the visual way of seeing it, and had the auto emails all set up. We didn't have to write any, they had all the emails already written. We just had to click off, you know, do you want an email sent out 1 hour before a talk starts, 5 hours? So, you know, they kind of took all that heavy lifting out, and they're the ones who then, I would never have known about Remo because I don't know where they're out of, but that was the difference. Hopefully that helped.
All right, Kathy, thank you so much for
Kathy.
this. Really appreciate it. And I think it gives everyone a perspective on opportunities and possibilities within their own businesses to continue to connect.
I think the photo retailers, if you've got if you've already have a class, if you haven't taken your classes online yet, you know, that's a great opportunity. You already have it's not hard to do. And there's a great, I think it's a good possibility. So.
Great. Awesome, Kat. Thank you so much.
Okay.
All right. Without any other questions, we're going to turn it over to Hans Hartman, who's going to review a survey that he did, and I'll let him explain everything.
Very much. Let's go to the next slide. That tells a little bit about the survey that we ran. So we ran this really in the midst of when everybody was in crisis mode. So the idea was to run a survey that was not so much focused on how bad it all was, but it's almost like ideation, try to get ideas, try to figure out creative ways, like Moshe already talked about how his business has adapted, try to get these ideas from as many different angles as possible. As it was still in the midst of the crisis, we did not expect to have much more than 25 people, so we were very happy to have 53 responses there. People could either respond anonymously, or if they didn't mind to share their initiatives with others, they could also include their names in the survey. And then we promoted it in different ways in the US through the Imaging Alliance, IPI, and then our own Visual First Perspectives newsletter, and then in Europe through PIV, or Photo Industry Verband, the half owner of Photokina. So we got a pretty broad audience. If you go to the next slide, there were these 3 sets of questions. Impact a little bit. Like I said, that was not the core focus. Initiatives around how to mitigate the situation. And then, you know, we also asked, well, is there anything positive that came out of this? Or do you have any suggestions for your fellow industry people? So we had a silver lining section as well. So let's go to the next slide. A little bit about the respondents. Were partially 38% were in the photo output, the photo printing industry, 21 retail distribution, and then a variety, as we also with our conference and research in general, we cover a lot of it, all the way from startups and app developers, camera on the capture side, etc. Sort of a mix of sizes of companies. if you add it up, what is it, like 42%? The first two are, at least 20, have at least 25 employees or more, and then quite a few smaller companies that could include retailers or app developers, startups. 60% came from North America at the bottom there, and then 26% from Europe, and then we had some Asia respondents as well. So let's go to the next slide. So we asked one question, basically, to what, or circling around the degree of impact. So 4 or 5 out of, a scale of 1 to 5, 4 or 5, very serious or very serious impact. And it's sort of interesting, the first 3, so 56% of the respondents says, hey, we were forced to close our business facility, or that had a significant or very serious impact. Of course, the revenue impact, were also very high, but I think the third one, so the inability to sell through regular channels, that was a big one. Interesting enough, all the way at the bottom there are also some impact that might not be totally obvious, but a lot of—
Thanks for holding. We appreciate your time and patience. Please stay on the line. We'll be back in just a moment.
Something. Yeah.
Jerry, you have the ability to mute people. So if you could just look through who's not muted and press mute.
Okay.
All right.
Nice music.
Our
Well, you
apologies.
mute yourself, probably. There we go. Good. Thank you.
No, I didn't do that.
I think it's Scott.
It's Barbara, so it's Hunt.
Okay. Can you still hear me?
I figure out how I can do that. Sure.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, at least the music wasn't too bad, so that's good. So startups are also being affected, that's all the way at the bottom there, by the inability to raise money, or that's a lot harder these days. So there's no surprise. So let's go to the next slides, where we talk about some measurements, how companies are dealing with it, how have they been mitigating the situation. So 79% they enabled employees to work from home. So that's really mainstream behavior. And if they did, so that's a slide at the top right there, it was in general, almost all of the employees. So they really moved to working from home situation. So in their case, more than 75% from home. The majority of people have applied for government grants and loans. 42% has laid off or furloughed employees. And if they did so, that's that slide on the right bottom, it was for, almost all the employees, 59% there. And then some other mitigation measures. 2 of them I will look at the next slide. So one is they start developing, well, don't go there yet. Okay, go back for a second. One is they start developing different products or services as a way to mitigate the situation. And another one that's very interesting is they actually change the business model. So we'll dive into those as well. So let's go to the next slide. And all in all, we had a lot of open questions because, like I said, the idea was more to use this survey for ideation. And all of those, I just did a sample of a few answers, the several hundred verbatim answers in the report, which you have a link all the way at the end. You can download that. But this gives some sense of new products or services. So people getting into financing as a way to sell their products. The company Printo from India, actually, they're really into COVID wear as a new product line that they are selling. Many companies talked in different ways about further going digitalization or selling digital products instead of only their traditional, in this case, a German-based school photography firm, instead of just printouts. Online education, quite a few people mentioned that as well. And then contactless delivery, Moshe already mentioned that earlier as what they're doing. just some sense of how people have been and are still very creative and say, hey, maybe we should not just continue selling the same stuff here because it's not working. People have been pretty creative. Next slide is then, and there's a little bit of a gray area whether something is a new product or service or whether they're actually changing the business model. But you see some companies actually making that choice. Should we do more B2B now or should we do more B2C now? Some of them are shifting from one area to another. And like Moshe also said, there is not a single right way of doing things. Everybody's figuring out their own situation, how to do that best. I think one company, and I had some further exchange with them because I know them well, and they also presented Visual First, is Hypno, which is traditionally a B2B video services and software company that works a lot with brands and big event photography. And they say, we have all the technology, there are no physical events happening anymore, our brands are not sponsoring us to do these events. So they came out with different solutions, B2C, and in particular around school graduations. So all these schools could very easily, all these students could make video messages as a end of year event. So let's go to the next slide. That was that third section I was talking about, have people not just mitigate the situation, but also come up with ideas, or do they see, actually positive silver lining things? And what I'm adding here was not part of the survey, but I got a lot of response when I start posting this on LinkedIn, and people really liked that initiative. So in Germany, as you might or might not know, the sort of the first major professional sports that started being open again. The games started with empty stadiums. So this is Borussia Mönchengladbach, a 55,000 seat stadium, and they did an initiative for consumers to upload their photos and order these cutout print products, and they put them on the stand. So they sold 13,000 of these personalized photo cutouts. It's a great, creative way of getting fan engagement and selling photo print products. So next slide, we'll talk more what came out of the survey itself. There's one company, was anonymously shared, but say, hey, we're selling a lot more consumer printers, which might tie a little bit in what also Ian was saying, consumer electronics up and people doing more things from home, especially with the stimulus checks in their pockets. Initiatives like film going strong. eFolor in Switzerland, a relatively, sort of like a shutterfly for Switzerland, Austria, part of Germany kind of company. They actually saw an uptake because people were spending time organizing their photos and ordering photo books because they had more time on their hands. Play, they're in the interactive video, they're doing things with digital brands now. Virtual yearbook signing, a company called Memories in Touch. Again, it's virtual, just some sense of classes, several photo retailers, just some sense of how people see something positive or came up with new ideas to weather the storm. So if you go to the next slide, what that sort of, I think probably the more interesting thing is what does this mean in the big scheme of things. So if you keep clicking, you will see some more. So one is Omar Leek. He used to be the founder of GigaOM. I did some research projects with him in the past. He wrote a really interesting article that I encourage you to check out. If you click further, yeah, there you go. So there were two things that he said. So one is when you look at these major events, like the financial crisis in 2008, the telecom crash in 2001, he sees a pattern that with these major events, the weak are weaker and the strong are stronger. And right now, with the pandemic, it's really big tech is bigger, is doing really, really well. If we click further, you will see some slides about Facebook, Microsoft, Google, all of them. Yeah, you can stop now. They're all doing really well, including an Amazon there. So that's sort of the shift that's happening now. That's number one. Number two is it's not so much that these momentous events, start completely new behavior, but it's often that extra push in the back to really change things. So in particular, now you see a further use of virtual, nothing new there, but now people are on it. Further use of online delivery, etc. You see a lot of things that are being turbocharged because of this event. And another very interesting quote from Microsoft, and their stock really went through the roof. They're doing really, really well. He says we have, the CEO, Nadella, we have seen 2 years worth of digital transformation compressed in 2 months. It's a major, major thing that's happening there. So if you click, the big tech companies are the winners so far, including a Zoom and a Slack. They're all doing really well. Even though, of course, part of the business is being negatively impacted by the pandemic. They're also dependent on budgets and advertising, etc. But overall, they're doing really well. They're benefiting from this. Not so in our industry. So if you further click there, and so the big players there, if you look on the capture side, of course, we already know that the digital standalone camera vendors have been suffering. That market has been down and was already down before the pandemic. So they're not the big winners, unlike tech overall. On the physical, the printing side of things, the Shutterflies of the world, some of them, or the Fujifilms or the Kodak Alera, some of them are dependent on physical retail distribution, and others have been really hampered because the production went down. So those are not obvious winners there either. So what that leaves with is the question, and I can't answer this yet, and I don't think anybody has, but it's sort of interesting to think then, if there are losers in this industry, there will be many losers, there will be many companies going out of business. Let's not sugarcoat this. Who will be the winners, who could be the winners. So if you click, these are just some loose thoughts. And again, often, as Omalik said, these were already things that, or these were already companies that were on a growth path. They were already kicking butt there, but will this be, turbocharged by the events? It could be, the ones, and it's sort of embarrassing because you already know that when an Instagram, a TikTok, a Snapchat, they're all doing well. Will they grow out of, through the roof now and maybe get adoption beyond these youngsters? Could be. Google or Amazon, are they going to take over also the photo print industry and compete with the Shutterflies of the world very effectively? The smartphone vendors, are they really, really putting the nails into the standalone camera industry? Or will there be winners that come out, out of unexpected areas and innovative startups that will seek the opportunities there? But no matter what it will be, such a momentous event like here, everything is up for grasp there, and there will be major changes, and that's sort of all I can see going forward there. Does that? Yeah, and actually the last slide, we'll forward the slides also. You can download the report and read all these comments verbatim as well.
All right, Hans, thank you very much. Anyone have any questions for Hans? That was interesting. You're right. There are going to be winners and there are going to be losers, and there are going to be people that take advantage of what's been going on and take advantage of what's happening in the among consumers, and could end up winners out of this. So we hope that's true for everybody. Okay, so without any questions, I'm going to go to our next presenter, who's going to speak for a while, and that's our friend Gerard Christianian from Mike's Camera, whose stores have been through the ringer, but he's opened, and he's going to talk about some lessons that he's learned. So Gerard, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you, Jerry, for organizing this, and thank you everybody for being here. I think the exchange of ideas that we're having is definitely been very material to me, and I hope I can contribute to the conversation. I have to say that the 7-8 weeks that we were closed have probably been the most stressful of my professional career in this field, and that's pretty much my life at this point. So the biggest challenges have been the lack of information, guidance, government clarity, I guess. With all the different aid packages that were being discussed and debated and put out, the lack of clarity within them and the ambiguities that were in these packages just made things extremely difficult to navigate. They were well-intentioned, but even the conflicts between some of the different things that were put out made it very difficult for us to move forward with a clear sense of the direction that we should be taking. Even now, as I'm sure many of you know, there was another bill that was passed by the Senate last night, which actually helps with some things, but then throws confusion in some other areas, and undoes some of the things that we had done in the past 6 weeks with the anticipation that what was on the ground was on the ground. So again, it's a difficult place to be.
Hi, everyone. Unfortunately, due to some technical difficulties, we were unable to record the rest of Gerard's presentation and also unable to record John Brule's presentation. We will have John's PowerPoint available for download on our website. We all know Gerard's wisdom. We've heard it all before, but hopefully we'll be able to bring more of Gerard to you in future presentations. So we apologize for this glitch. We at the Imaging Alliance plan to do a few more of these presentations over the coming weeks to help guide all of us through these turbulent times. And we invite you to participate in future presentations. We will keep you posted on when the next meeting will be. Thank you for your support of the Imaging Alliance, and we hope to see you again soon. Thank you.